Hi, I'm Meshal Malik, and you're watching Indus Special. To live a life that is safe and that allows us to progress, it is essential for our basic human rights to be protected. But how is technology, one of the most powerful forces of our modern times, impacting our fundamental rights? That's our discussion today. Joining us for this segment is Mr. Advocate Prashant Mali, a cyber law expert. He joins us from Mumbai, and Professor Atholl Johnston, a clinical pharmacologist at the Queen Mary University of London. He joins us from London. Thank you both for joining us and welcome to the show. Advocate Mali, I'd like to begin with you. Now, just to set the premise of our discussion that is to follow, do you think that it is becoming more and more difficult and challenging to protect our basic and most fundamental human rights? Or do you think that technology is actually providing us with an opportunity?
Currently, because of the technology constantly invading our privacy, the basic human right of privacy constantly gets deprived. Because all human beings, if you look at it, the technology, biometrics or facial recognition technology, or the various apps which we use, they constantly keep invading our privacy. So technology has whatever good it has given, but it is definitely compromised on the basic human right of privacy for us.
Right. And you're, of course, referring to Article 2 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which enshrines the basic fundamental right to privacy of a person. Now, when we're talking about this being infringed upon in this era, you mentioned surveillance as one of the aspects, but how is this more deep? How is it going even beyond what we see at the surface level?
Surveillance in every city, majorly in every country, specifically in Southeast Asia, all the governments and the local governments have implemented what is called as CCTV monitoring. And this CCTV monitoring are always majority of the time having facial recognition software inbuilt. So this keeps tracking a person. This has an algorithm and AI built in. This keeps tracking a person when he moves from point location A to location B. The whole location can be tracked. This location, again, if they couple this with various feeds available from various social media apps or the GPS location from social media apps, this becomes a very lethal combination of invading privacy of an individual, and it amounts to complete surveillance on a person's life, because right to privacy also means right to be left alone. And this basic tenet is not kept. Now, you are not kept alone. You can always be tracked, or you can be backtracked wherever you and how the pattern has been moved from point A to point B.
Right. Now, Professor Johnston, as Advocate Mali talked about the adverse impacts of technology in this regard, how it is infringing upon our basic right to privacy, how do you think technology is impacting the healthcare sector? Do you feel like it is providing an opportunity for the basic human right of accessing good quality healthcare being improved?
Well, certainly the technology has improved now, and you can get a lot more information and a lot more detail about people from their healthcare records. Computers make it much easier for you to access this legally and, of course, illegally. So you can be hacked and people can gain access to your medical records illegally and follow you and see the sorts of things that you do. And of course, now our ability to measure whole genomes, we can get into the genetics of people. We can look at what they're likely to do. We can look at whether or not they're going to have any particular diseases or not, and we can take action on that, rightly or wrongly. Starting at before birth, where we're screening children in the womb to see if they might have some particular genetic disease, and choosing whether we allow those children to be born or not. And in addition to that, people who are already alive, we can alter their genetic makeup, either their individual genetic makeup or their children's genetic makeup, by interfering with the germ lines and actually reprogramming their genetic material that's going to give rise to their children.
Professor Johnston, now when we talk about the healthcare sector and we talk about technology, some of the things go beyond what an average person even understands. How something can be artificially created and what are the implications of that? What are the dangers of how fast technology is moving into creating artificial organs, how it's creating artificial robots carrying out medical procedures? Is there an adverse impact of all of this?
Well, there's always an adverse impact. For every benefit, there's usually some adverse event as well. And it's beholden on us to make sure that we understand the risks and the benefits of any technology that we introduce into medical care and how that's used. If we take something as simple as drugs, a common aspirin is a fantastic drug, but it has adverse effects. You need to limit those, but realize the benefits you're getting from them. And medical technology in terms of human rights is exactly the same. There will be big benefits from getting the medical technology as it is today, but there's going to be some adverse events which we need to keep in check.
And what are some of the examples of those events that people, doctors, especially healthcare experts, need to be on the lookout for?
Well, I think it's more society needs to have a look at. Do we really want cloned children? Do we want to have clones of us born? Do we want people to live forever effectively by regenerating themselves a new body? Screening, or are we selecting people? We go back to the Third Reich and Hitler. If he'd had the ability we have now, it would have been a very different world if he started to select people on the basis of their genetic makeup.
Right. Now, Advocate, as Professor Johnston stated here, there are some very important questions to be asked, not just of experts, but of society at large. Now, when we're talking about technology, it changes so rapidly that most people can't keep up with the changes, yet alone try to understand what is happening. How do you think it becomes difficult for legislation to keep up with these changes and to work towards trying to come up with laws that are protecting humans on one end, but are also compatible with these progressions in technology?
What has happened is technology has moved with a pace where law has not catched up with. The catching up of law always is after some event happens. It is not too many laws are always future-proof. And this technology changes at so rapid pace that this technologies, these laws will never cope up with what technologies are going through right now. But what requires is 1.1 is awareness. What requires is these technology products, when they are launched to mass market, they need to comply with the basic tenets of law, like principles of natural justice. In many cases, it is seen that these principles of natural justice or the basic human values, human rights are not followed with. What is needed across the world is about awareness on both the ends, awareness from the technology guys to its users about what kind of rights it can invade, how it needs to be protected. The major issue remains is the amount of money which these tech companies spend on awareness and to specifically of legal awareness is pretty less. They are not governed by certain statutes across all the countries that how much amount of money should be spent for such kind of awareness. This has to come up. They need to be sensitive towards their responsibility towards society, which is for many a times found absent. Many research have larger impact on the human as a being and its existence, so that also needs to be checked. Rampant research without caring about the law of the land or basic human rights is causing so much big amount of issues as of now in different parts of the world.
Right. Now, Advocate Mali, you made a couple of points, but the first one I do want to talk about is how you mentioned that these big tech companies don't invest enough in public awareness, and they need to do that. Now, these tech companies, of course, are operating on a business model. Their prime motive is a profit. Their prime motive is revenue. Is it even possible, is it even practical to expect that they will indulge in public awareness?
There is something called as corporate social responsibility, or CSR, and which every organization which is making profit out of the very much society needs to undertake. And awareness is can be very much part of mass awareness. So they need to do it, because if their subjects exist, then only they will grow and they will prosper in the industry which they are serving. If it is serving the existing citizens or existing users negatively, and they are basically killing down the basic rights been given to them by various statutes and law, then it is detrimental to them.
Right. Mr. Johnston, on that similar point of public awareness, now we are seeing the online healthcare market surge, whether it's in terms of apps or online sites where you can put in your symptoms or you can monitor certain healthcare symptoms, your healthcare routine, anything of that sort. Now, this too comes with benefits, but it also comes with negative implications. In all of this, who is responsible for spreading awareness on how technology should be used when it comes to health?
Well, it's very difficult. Obviously, I agree with the last speaker, Mr. Mali. There needs to be some social responsibility from the tech companies, and most of them, by and large, are responsible and do have thought about the issues that might be involved here, but occasionally they don't. And of course, sometimes they don't realize the issues that arise from their technology, because it isn't them.
Right.
It's the use that other people make of it. We've only got to look at Facebook and the way politicians are using it now to promote themselves, or perhaps foreign powers are using it to interfere with elections in other countries. Those were not something that I imagine Mr. Zuckerman thought about when he invented Facebook. He thought it was going to be effectively what it is, a social network, something for good and not something for bad, as it's turned out for some people.
Right. So, Professor Atholl Johnston, as I was saying, there is, of course, two sides to this picture. We have been focusing on the adverse impacts, but there is an opportunity that technology provides for people to progress with their human rights, to protect their human rights. Do you see that opportunity?
There's a lot of opportunities offered by the improvements we have now in medical technology. We'll be able to extend our lives, not just extend our lives. There's no point in extending our lives if we don't live good lives, and I don't mean I mean healthy lives. And we've a lot of opportunities to do that. We can change the course of diseases now. We understand a lot more about what's causing disease, and we can take steps to improve that. And people who are at the end of life can be helped to lead more meaningful lives that we didn't have the opportunity before. And
Right.
At the other end, children are not being born with deformities or problems of missing enzymes or things that shorten their lives and cause them suffering.
Right. Now, Professor Johnston, one thing I do want to talk about is, as I mentioned earlier as well, one thing important for humans isn't just getting healthcare, but for it to be affordable. Is technology providing that opportunity for healthcare becoming more and more affordable? Now, we also see more and more life-saving drugs becoming more expensive in the markets. It seems to be a different trend altogether.
Well, things ultimately in the long run get cheaper. If you think about the Human Genome Project, that cost multi-million dollars to screen the genome in half a dozen people. Currently, it's less than £1,000 to get a whole genome in one single person. Now, £1,000 may be outside or might be too expensive for some people, but that's in quite a short time. It's a little bit like computers. Every year there is a doubling in the ability to do things, and the price is falling.
But Professor Johnston, sorry to interrupt here, but the price of, for instance, insulin rises to a point when people miss out on their doses during this present time. It causes deaths, and those deaths are expected to increase according to reports. Isn't that a now problem more than let's wait it out and see what happens in the future?
That's a that is a now problem, and there's a very good reason why it's a now problem. There's been a major outbreak of diseases in pigs where insulin comes from, and that has caused a rise in the price. That will resolve itself in due course. And of course, we're now producing synthetic insulin, and that will get cheaper with time because more companies are coming in. We're improving the way we do it, and it will improve. In general, things get better and things get cheaper. It may not happen at this moment, but it certainly will happen in the long run.
Right. On that point, I'd also like to introduce Ms. Chamanka Gamage, who's an activist joining us from Colombo. Thank you so much, Ms. Chamanka, for joining us. Now, I will continue with that point that I was talking to Professor Johnston about. Do you feel like technology provides humans with an opportunity for a better life?
Yeah, definitely it provides a better life because technology has become a part of people right now because it is a way that people can engage in society and have the liberty to point out their perspectives about particular issues through social media, and also through electronic media they have the ability to receive information, and it is a way that they get conditioned to think critically and also face issues and also take actions against particular issues that are wrongfully has a wrong impact and a negative impact in a society, and they have the privilege to use technology and start online petitions and get that signed and actually make a social change in the society. So right. In that way, I believe, yeah.
Mr. Manga, you mentioned rightfully that social media allows people to connect with each other and it allows the inflow of information. But we also know that social media in many parts of the world is used as a tool by governments, especially by authoritarian governments, when they want to crack down on people. In this hand, when people become so reliant, so dependent on technology, it can be used against them. Would you say that that harms us more than it proves to be a benefit?
Definitely. I believe that there are particular electronic media channels that takes one party's side and become biased upon the other party or that particular politician and underrate that person. And that has become a source that has manipulated and misled people and provided false information in that scenario. That becomes a platform for their own beneficials. So this happens when certain media channels are affiliated to particular parties, and when a country like you mentioned, when you live in an authoritarian country. But in our country, we have the privilege to take actions against such unjust things, and also social media. If you talk about social media, I think in order to prevent this, I believe if we introduce something like fact checking, this will be a better way that we can take actions against such false information, so that people won't be persuaded to believe in those.
Right. Professor Johnston, on that point of misinformation, health and people's health is not left alone either in that matter. We saw the anti-vaccination movement gaining quite a momentum on social media. In this regard, do you feel like social media is dangerous in many regards for the healthcare sector and for people's health?
Well, it certainly can have problems, and the anti-vaxxers are a real issue. And I think have been responsible for the death of quite a few people and a disability in quite a few people by saying that vaccines are not good and we should not do it. Vaccines have been the major medical advance, I think, in the 20th century, and the widespread use of smallpox, polio, all of those have brought wonderful benefits to throughout the world. And made a really big difference. And social media, it just has to be counteracted. We have to get used to trying to filter out the good facts from the bad facts. And that's difficult. And obviously, the likes of Facebook and the people who control these media need to have some social responsibility and do something. And I believe Facebook in particular has done something about it.
Right. Mr. Chamanka, talking about development now, growth and employment for a nation, especially a developing nation, is essential. And that, of course, leads to better lives, better quality lives for its citizens. How do you feel like in the past years, especially in Sri Lanka, technology has played a role in doing that?
Yeah, so in 90s, there was steps taken to improve the IT education in our country. In that scenario, University of Moratuwa was ranked number 1 in Google Summer of Code International Annual Program. And currently, Sri Lanka's IT industry's goal is to achieve USD 5 billion in export by 2022. And in that case, they are hoping to create 200,000 job opportunities and also uplift 1,000 tech startups. So in that case, we believe that there is a good this platform that we can provide a better life for these people by providing job opportunities as well as providing good technology. So our recent government, past government under Honorable Ranil Wickremesinghe, we provided tablets. So we provided tabs to every school in our country. So those are the main schools that we consider in the urban areas. They were facilitated with tabs so that they have that exposure, so that they are more into technology. And in our country, from grade 5 onwards, students are given IT as a subject to do. And when they are in grade 11, they are going to face ordinary examination and ordinary level. And in that case, that exam, IT stands as the external alternative subject. So they can select it as a basket subject. Even for A-levels, it's the same.
Right.
Yeah.
Professor, what are your words of caution, especially as a professional in the healthcare field, for those who look at science and technology with glowing eyes as being the solution for everything, going towards it at a fast pace? You mentioned earlier that we need to raise some important questions. What words of caution would you give?
Nothing is ever the answer to everything. You need to think about what you're doing, and you need to question people as to why they're doing things and what they hope to achieve by it, and think what the consequences might be. That's easy to say, very difficult to do. But without actually oversight of what's being done in the healthcare field, things will go wrong.
Right. On that point, now we're joined by Mr. Chris van Klaveren, who is the director of the Amsterdam Center for Learning Analytics. He joins us from Amsterdam. Thank you so much, Mr. Klaveren, for joining us, and welcome to this show. Now, as we were talking about how technology provides an opportunity for the progress of human rights. Now, by 2030, many countries in the world, the United Nations itself has set the goal for good quality education to be given to each and every child. Do you think technology is providing space for that to happen?
On the sides of the medal, I think you have the offering of education, which is very important. And I think technology can radically change the extent to which education can be offered to, for example, development countries. You have many digital tools and many good education programs at place. And you can easily transfer these programs to development countries in an efficient way. So that's the positive side. The other side of the medal is that there are many, many, many studies on the effectiveness and efficiencies of technology in learning. And up to now, there's not so much evidence that indeed learning can be improved, both in more time-intensive and time-efficient education as in more effective education.
Right. Mr. Klaveren, before we delve deeper into this, I do want for the viewers as well, for you to give us more insight into that distinction, learning and education. Now, as you mentioned, it can help in developing nations, but many studies show that remote learning through technology might not be best for learning. When learning is missing from education, is there any point to it?
Yes, so if you want to make a difference between learning and technology and education, so education is the complete package, right? So that's the package that you should offer to students to learn. So you can think of technology, but you can also think of ways to instruct. You can think of effective teachers, effective learning materials. So many things foster learning. With respect to technology, what we know is that technology can really help in getting access to education, which is a very good thing. You can imagine that, I think, right? So, for example, you have, I don't know if you know this, Duolingo. So you can use this tool or this app to learn languages. But there's a backdraw to this app, and that is there is no instruction. There's no diagnostic instrument. So if you do not learn using this instrument, how can you learn? Who can help you with instruction? Who can tell you what you did wrong? So that's not built in generally in these technological improvements.
Right. Now, another conversation that is coming up a lot related to artificial intelligence and the impact that is having on the educational sector. What can you tell us about that? How is that going to shape future learning? And how is it shaping learning today?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Thank you for asking this question, actually. I think that what is very important to consider when we talk about AI is that generally it's about machine learning and deep learning. And these are predictive models. So what we can do with these models is that we can predict whether students give a correct answer or not, and that we can adjust and learn what we should offer to these students, and that we can learn which students are at risk not learning. So, for example, we can learn very quickly that some students are very likely that they will give the wrong answer. However, this is really the predictive part. So what we would like to do is that we not only want to learn that we can predict well, we also want to know what causes the deficiency. And once we understand what causes the deficiencies, we develop an intervention or a program that actually solves these deficiencies. And then you are moving away from AI more towards educational psychology or education sciences, where you use RCTs to measure the effectiveness.
Right.
So to summarize, the AI is very good to predict students at risk, to predict if somebody will learn, but it does not offer clear-cut solutions.
Right. Mr. Klaveren, I just want to unpack that a little more to understand it a little better for myself and the viewers. It seems like AI in this regard helps in profiling students. Am I correct?
Yes.
So there have always been dangers historically associated to profiling, whether it's done by the police, whether it's done by any institution. So that would also transfer when it's done by AI in education. Isn't that true?
Yes, that's true. I mean, but that's one side, that's risk of profiling. At the same time, for example, at the University of Amsterdam, where I work, we use machine learning methods, which is AI methods as well. It's a subgroup of AI methods to predict early dropouts. And the intuition is, if we know which student is going to drop out before it actually happens, we can actually help them preventively.
But that's the
Right? So it
ideal
also has that-
situation, right? Mr. Klaveren, I understand that part, but that is the ideal situation when a teacher is able to predict a student will drop out and then they intervene in a positive manner. It can go either or. If they find out that a child is about to drop out, they might just give up on them early on. That's a possibility as well.
That's a question, or that's... Well, it depends. I mean, in the Netherlands, that would never be a possibility in that sense, is that generally institutions in the Netherlands, for example, they have these performance measures, and dropout is seen as a bad thing. So it would generally be very good that students remain in the institute. So they will try their utmost to keep students there and to help them. But it's true that on the one hand, if you profile, you can also use this information for the bad. On the other hand, with respect to students, right, or as well in university as in other education levels, if you look at the grades, if you look at the attendance, these are also predictors for how well a student will perform. So if you will use these signals to make a decision on whether they will be helped, then this is not so much different than machine learning algorithms.
Right. Mr. Klaveren, I do want to draw a pair a little here. Now, as you're mentioning, these are some of the things that are happening in the educational sector. Now, when we look at social media and how AI operates there, how different things, algorithms operate there, we often don't understand what's happening. Do teachers, do professionals in the educational sector understand what's happening as they are using it? Or do they wait and see the results? How is this carried out? Are risks and experiments taken along the way? Or is it done in isolation?
Yeah, well, this is a very good, very strong remark. I think that there are 2 points. Generally, I think the answer is no. Teachers, they have no clue what's really happening in the adaptive part. So there are algorithms and teachers don't know what these algorithms do. They just see that these algorithms are adaptive. And if they're rightly adaptive or wrongly adaptive, they don't know. So this is a bad thing. So what we need is that the algorithms that are used in education should be transparent, right? Should be very clear what they do. And they should be made understandable for teachers, that they really, first of all, understand what these algorithms do, but also that they are informed in a way by these algorithms that, for example, these algorithms give feedback, like, hey, you know what I'm doing, look at this student, maybe you can help, or maybe you should do this, or it gives recommendations, but only in a voluntarily way, in a way that the teacher really knows this is what the algorithm does, and this is how it tries to help me. So that's a very good point. And the danger, I want to add one more thing to that, it's what we see in Europe at least, is that you have many firms that develop these apps. And the goal is, of course, on the one hand, offering a useful educational product. On the other hand, it's also making profit. So these algorithms are not being made transparent. And we will not be able to test whether they are effectively helping the student, the teacher, or whatever, or the education institute as a whole. So I think that if we want to solve this societal issue, we should really develop these algorithms together with the public sector and make these algorithms transparent.
Right. On that point, thank you so much for joining us, Chamanka Gamage from Sri Lanka, Advocate Prashant Mali from Mumbai, Professor Atholl Johnston from London, and Chris Van Klaveren from Amsterdam. We're going to go for a short break. When we come back, we discuss how technology is impacting global politics today and how we can expect for it to shape politics in the future. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now, earlier in the show, we talked about how technology is impacting human rights, both in regard to how people are feeling more empowered and protected, but also how technology is making things more complicated. When it comes to politics, there is no doubt that technology has had a significant impact. We discussed this in greater depth on the show. What exactly the impact technology has had on political engagement, diplomacy, and political discourse. Joining us for this discussion is Natalie Sarkic-Todd, who is a former British diplomat, European affairs, and media expert. She joins us from Brussels. Thank you so much, Natalie, for joining us, and welcome to the show. Natalie, let me begin with a very broad question. How do you feel like the political landscape has transformed in, let's say, the past 5 years because of technology?
Firstly, thank you for inviting me on. I'm very happy to be here. I think what we've seen is the good use of technology for helping with political engagement, and in particular, direct engagement between politicians and the public. But I think we've also seen in the last few years in particular how technology can be used and, in fact, misused to start to manipulate voters, the public. And I think we saw that in particular in the EU referendum in the UK already 3 years ago, when generally politicians, the media and the public were not really aware of how that technology could misuse their data and therefore manipulate their opinions. And I think we're seeing it again right now with the UK general elections. But in fact, people are a little bit wiser to those techniques that were used 3 years ago. And so we are starting to see them being called out. The kind of fake news checking that the Conservative Party has done has been called out, not just by the media and themselves, but also by the technology companies like Twitter and Google. So I think, we're in the eye of the storm, but I see some hope.
Right. Now, I want to unpack the answer you gave because that tackled several points together. Now, you mentioned that political engagement has increased, but with that political engagement, we are seeing a rise of polarization. And that, too, is, of course, in how technology and social media platforms are designed. They're designed to show you certain material on your news feeds. All that has been revealed to us. Now, you also said that users are becoming more and more aware. I want to quote a study on that point. A Pew Research study showed that most Americans in January 2019, still didn't realize how Facebook tracked their data, their information, even despite there being so many scandals. Now, what I want to get to with putting out all this information is, does this work in favor for political parties when the users, when the audience are naive, when they don't know as much?
Well, I think it can work in their favor, of course, and we have seen that indeed. But I think it's also starting to go against them. The fact that Twitter and Google called out the Conservative Party in this election campaign for very obvious abuses of information online was widely reported. And so there is this, I think, there's this feeling that general public may indeed, and most of us don't understand the techniques of how our data is used and abused, but we do understand when something is wrong or misrepresented and oftentimes quite outright lies. So it may not be there in the research, the studies yet in terms of people understanding the technology, but I do think we are starting to see, only just starting, but starting to see a new shift, which I think that media and, in fact, politicians have a real responsibility to kind of really get their teeth into it and start to understand what can be done without regulation and what maybe needs to be done with regulation.
Right. Natalie, I just want to take a broader picture, moving out from within the state, from within the nation, and moving between international relations. How do you feel like social media has aided and helped in diplomatic relations? And do you feel like it has any actual powerful impact on foreign relations, or it just adds to the spectacle?
Oh, no, I think it definitely has had and can still have a positive impact. I mean, it's certainly, just more generally, the internet and the sharing of online information certainly helps us to see the world the way it is and make the connection between what's happening around the world and therefore hopefully can help us understand the balance of geopolitical relationships and power, and in particular with the globalization that we've seen. So I think in terms of general raising the level of awareness and understanding of how we are all living in the same world and how some of our issues are interconnected is a good thing. I just think that it's when it gets misused and only partially. You only get a partial picture sometimes because of the manipulation where the problems start to come.
Right. And in the point of international relations, I do want to also talk about how and whether technology is being weaponized more and more, especially when we're seeing greater trade wars and how tech is playing a role in all of this. How do you see that shaping future politics?
Well, I think it's already been shaping politics, perhaps not so much on the trade side, but certainly on the political side in terms of information. And I mean, it's very well known now in terms of Russia's role in that. I was a diplomat serving in what was then the Soviet Union, so I'm kind of familiar with the Cold War techniques, and weaponization of information is very clearly one of those techniques, which I think has been used quite extensively over the last 5, probably 10 years. So I think we're already suffering from that, and it's obviously not just limited to Russia. It tends to be a government technique as well that most governments will try to make use of. Whether that will significantly impact the way things develop in the future, again, I'm not sure, because I think if we have the transparency and the knowledge of these techniques and that they are happening, that's already the first step in being able to manage them and try to kind of uphold those fundamental values that we've had so far under supporting our democracies.
Right. On that point, thank you so much, Natalie Sarkic-Todd, for joining us from Brussels. At that point, we're going to end the show. Thank you so much for watching Indus Special. We will see you again next time with more stories. Till then, goodbye and take care.